What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 live stream for the Genesis Invitational. It's the first time we've done a morning stream in quite some time, so I hope everyone has got their coffee in the cup and is ready to break down some golf today. We're going to get you ready for all of your moving day action here. That'll be for DFS, also for props and betting a little bit later on. But any questions, anything that you're curious about, strategy-based, any player pool deep dives, let me know in the chat and we'll go through that as well. But it looks like the live stream is already on fire here early this morning, so you'd love to see all the sweaty tryhards in the chat. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. We got Go Collect in the chat. Also, If the Thunder Don't Get Ya was there in the chat too. I think I may have butchered that name, but doing my best. Still early here. We got Mailman carrying in the chat as well. Reality Lime. I don't know if I could say hi to all of you guys, as I think this is the most chats we've ever had before going live before, but welcome on in. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. And any questions that you guys have, we're going to go through towards the middle end of the live stream. So we'll hold off on those for right now, but feel free to throw those in the chat. And the only thing I need you to do is to smash that like button if you guys haven't already. But looks like somebody found the Patreon page and is enjoying the content. You'll love to see that. Morning streams are a little different, but I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. But the first thing I want to talk about would be our round 2 results, which ended up being pretty solid. From the prop side of things, we had a whole bunch of cashes. Jake Napa did end up taking it at under 69.5 and took that with Sepp Straka in cash. We also had a bunch of 3 balls we cashed yesterday, including a Max Homa. You can see another round stroke slip that we went with. That was Griffin and Henley, actually, after they bumped upwards, which, by the way, crazy that people were taking overs yesterday with the conditions being so easy. So if you're one of those people, thank you for giving me better lines on those two. And then we also cashed out on a little free ball on Griffin, and then also on Sahith Theegala too. So obviously stoked about that, hoping to keep that going over the next few days. And for the Showdown, it wasn't quite a takedown for yours truly, but did have about a 3x day. So pretty okay with that, right? Anytime you're into the positive and you can pad the bank for a little bit, that's going to be a good thing. We've got 2 more rounds to work with here. And based on weather for round number 3, it's looking very similar to yesterday. So from the prop perspective, not much is going to change from the course read. And then also from what's actually playing well at this golf course, I don't think that that's going to change very much either. You've got almost pristine conditions. I'm not sure if it's going to be lift clean in place this time around. That's the one thing that might be changing for today. But birdie percentage is going to be important. Long distance off the tee guys that can take advantage of the par 5s and number 10 are also going to be at a distinct advantage. And then I would say something that is sneaky important around here, that's not just because of the conditions, is around the green play. And that's something that you probably heard from a lot of touts this week because of the hard conditions, but it's also important even on an easy day like today for the par 5s, also number 10 for getting up and down on a birdie. And because for Showdown, we're trying to optimize on birdies, that's where the vast majority of your raw points are going to be coming from. I think looking at around the green, try and get up and down and convert on those is probably more important than most people would expect. But from the weather perspective, it looks extremely flat throughout the day. It is going to be 2 sums off of hole 1. So in theory, there could have been a weather edge if we had some crazy weather going on. But as you can see from the very starts, they're starting at, I believe, 7:15 local time. So in just over an hour from now, it is going to be a bit cooler, only 45 degrees to start the day, but only about 3 to 5 miles an hour of winds, and that carries throughout the rest of the day. And although the wind gusts get slightly more significant, and let's emphasize slightly there, I mean, you're talking about a 3 to a 4 mile an hour difference from the morning to the afternoon. The sustained winds are almost the exact same. And then also the temperatures are going to be a lot warmer. So although the winds might be a little bit of a negative, you're going to have those temperatures that I think are actually going to more than overtake that. And when you combine the fact that the later starters are your players that are in form, that are playing the best golf this weekend, that are probably the best course fits because of that too, I actually think that that side's going to play easier. Now, is that something that you have to account for in your DFS process? I personally don't think so. I think that it's more so that talent level, the form that is getting you onto some of those later players. And because we're looking at the shots gained metrics, we're prioritizing guys with a good course fit. We're going to end up on quite a few of those guys anyways, but I don't think you want to completely eliminate the earlier guys because that's where a lot of your leverage is going to come from. And the players that just snuck through the cut line are going to be significantly lower owned than the players that we have going off later. So that's why I think it's important to still have some of those players in there. And in fact, you could say in the large 150 max sort of contest that those earlier starters would be some of the best plays that you have. And, you know, although they might be playing a 0.25 shot harder golf course, which slightly matters, but really not that much, right? When it's all said and done, they're going to be maybe half or even a third of the ownership of some of the guys going off later. And obviously they don't have a 2 to a 3x lower hit percentage. So that's why you might want to look to some of those players. And personally, why I have quite a few of those guys in my player pool. So the next thing to go through would be the ownership, which we were kind of hinting at right there, which is honestly the biggest edge that we have in PGA DFS. In particular for Showdown, when it's just an 18-hole sample size, that variance gets ramped up and the importance of getting differentiation into your builds gets even higher than what it was before. And for main slate, it already matters. It's something that we talked about quite a bit for our main slate live stream this week. But for round 2 and 3 Showdown, where placement points aren't in play, maybe even double or triple that importance. So we're going to go through the top 10 highest owned players together. This sheet, of course, is from my Patreon page. So if you guys are trying to follow along and see the projections for every single player that is teeing it up, that's how you guys can find it. And it's on the Golf DFS tier. It's how you get access to everything that you're seeing on here. But let's go through the top 10 in ownership before we start some of those deep dives. So number one's going to be Rory McIlroy at 11,500. Being close to the lead and being a stud is a for sure prospect to get ownership. And because Scotty Scheffler has struggled a little bit, some of the ownership that would typically go to a Scotty is being invested into Rory McIlroy lineup. So he's a bit more expensive than I think you'd really expect to see as a second man in, but people are still getting there, which means that the 9K range is also getting a little bit of extra ownership, because if you're going to use a Rory, you can't really use a top into the 9K range or 10K guy as your second man in, unless you're willing to invest to 2 to 3 players in the 6K range. So the lineup construction, the far more common one with the Rory McIlroy, is going to be him, maybe a lower 9K range player or an upper 8K range player as your second man in, and you're seeing slight ownership bumps because of that. But your second highest owned player would be a Fleetwood at 10,400, a stud also playing some of the better golf of the guys at the top. I still have Scotty getting ownership at 21.1%, in particular because now that he's got 2 guaranteed rounds ahead of him, and he looked a lot better yesterday, I don't think as many people are going to be scared on using him even at $13,600. And he's cheaper than he has been the entire week, so I think that's also going to slightly inflate that ownership number a little bit more. Xander Schauffele at -9, he's 9,800 and also a bit over 20%. But it's a lot of the studs. You're going to see that. That's usually the case for rounds 1 through 3 Showdown, but you do see that reliance on the leaderboard position. And there are a few exceptions to the rule, like maybe a Cantlay, a Victor Hovland, that are getting ownership just because they're maybe a little bit cheaper than they should be. But this is also where you're getting that Rory McIlroy effect. Your guys like a Cantlay, a Hovland, that are in that 8K range or lower 9K range, as opposed to being $500 to $1,000 more expensive, are affordable and usable as second pieces in. And I don't think a lot of people are really that comfortable with using somebody like a Cantlay or a Hovland as their first man into a lineup, which is why it's important to note what sort of lineups are going to be using those players. Because when you start with a Rory, a Cantlay, a Hovland aren't just going to be the 18 to the 20% that you're seeing here. They're probably going to be close to 25 to 35% owned in those sort of lineup constructions. So, obviously ownership, a big part of our process, and it is extremely nuanced. But the more that you play DFS, the more that you play in these large 150 max contests, the more and more that you'll pick up on these sort of trends. But the other last few players that we'll point out would be Hideki. Also, a Minwoo Lee is the first piece of non-9 or 10K chalk, I guess, outside of a Hovland that we're seeing on there. But at just $8,000, he's 17.2% owned in my projections. And what you've got to realize is that there are guys at the top end of the 7K range that are like 5 to 6% owned, maybe slightly above that. I think it's like 7 to 8% owned for the low end guys at that portion of the board. But that's more than double the ownership of some of the other guys around them. And Minwoo had the second place last week. He's playing really well this week as well, making a whole lot of birdies, which is good for Showdown purposes. But you can't tell me that he's got twice the optimal percentages. And by the way, the top end of the 7K range of this field is stacked. It's guys that have won on tour and that are top 25 players on tour. You can't tell me that he has twice the chance to get there as those guys. He just doesn't. The numbers bear that out. He might grade out better than most players, but he's getting a lot more steam than he should in the process. So I would say as you go further down in the pricing, when you look at the ownership and the kind of decisions that you're making matter more and more, because the spread's going to get bigger and bigger. And you didn't see any 6K guys, even really any 7K range guys on that top 10. But you've got a few 6 and 7K range guys that are close to 10 to 15% owned that have 2 to 3%ers that are priced right around them. So because it's such a variant format and because they're the lower quality players in the 6 and the 7K range, you're going to see me fading a lot of that sort of chalk. Whereas up top, I might be comfortable playing one of these guys that's 20 to 25% because they're one of the best players in the field. So that's the ownership. If you guys want to see the entire spreadsheet, you can on my Patreon page. Again, link in the description to check it out. But But what we're going to focus on next before going through your deep dives is going to be what we do to build our player pool. And part of that's going to come down to the shots gained metrics, which is where all the deep dives come in. That's ball striking poppers, short game regression candidates, which we're going to expand on here in just a second. But because golf is so variant, I mean, that's why we mentioned the ownership so much, and everyone talks about getting leverage into your lineups. It means you shouldn't only be looking at yesterday's stats. If you're only looking at the round 2 stuff and thinking that's going to give you a complete clear picture of what's going to happen for moving day, then you're foolish, right? Golf's not a sport that is that consistent from round to round, which is why we want to round off our player pool process with a few other categories that aren't based on what happened Friday. That'd be course history, guys that have played well at Riviera. They've got high upside players in there as well. People that go after pins, are aggressive, are good par 5 scores, high birdie or better percentage players, so that we can get the most raw birdie production. And, we already mentioned it with the weather before, but I think that that's really something that we want to lean into. So I'm prioritizing that today. I've got quite a few high upside players in my player pool, also quite a few course history players to round it off as well. And then some of the more traditional plays would be your ball striking poppers and your short game regression candidates. But I feel like a lot of people in the industry only play these top 2 categories, or maybe only even play the top category that you have on this list. I would say that if you're playing more than maybe 5 lineups, that you need a more well-rounded process. And by being very intentional about why you're playing who you are, you're going to get some of those nasty plays out of there, and you're going to be able to check your results afterwards. It's not something I always mention on these live streams, but I really like having these tags as well, because I can go back, I can see which tags worked the best, and then maybe emphasize those ones a little bit more the next day, and then de-emphasize the ones that weren't as useful that you had. And, you don't just want one 18-hole sample size to completely change your process from round to round. But, if I'm taking this data in for a month or two, and then I'm starting to notice those kind of trends, that's where I'll make adjustments to my round 2, round 3 showdown process. And, it's an ever changing process, an ever evolving way of attacking PGA DFS. And as the field gets sharper, you've got to make your own edges yourself and try and get sharper and sharpen the axe, as they say, to try and stay ahead of what the rest of the competition is doing. And that's something that I pride myself on, something that I think a lot of you guys should try to do yourselves as well, is find your own lane, figure out what works for you, and then whatever works, just do more of it. Just optimize it. That's why we look for the high birdie percentage players. We want the highest scoring players. So what do? We go after the guys that make the most birdies. I know it seems pretty straightforward, but something that I think a lot of you guys can take from this. So that's what I'm looking for in my player pool. And by the way, on this player pool tab towards the left, every single player that I have in my player pool has the reasoning behind it. So whether they're a ball striking popper, they're a player with good course history, if you're part of my Patreon page or one of my subscribers, you'll know the why on every single player that I'm getting to. And I don't think a lot of other websites can even come close to saying that. They'll put out plays, they'll put out, cores, values, whatever. Every different site has different names for it, but they won't, at least most of them, won't give you full information on all of their plays. Maybe on their core, they'll give you some information, but literally, I'm a 150 max player. I think it's around 25 players in my player pool for today. Bigger slates, normally closer to like 30 or 40 players. Every single player has that rhyme and reasoning behind it. So just clean up your process. Also give yourself an idea of why you were on your plays so that you can vet yourself afterwards. But like I said, Patreon page is where you guys can find this spreadsheet. But now let's go through some of the shots gained metrics and what we can find from the round 2 data. So let's bring that up. We're going to go to bet the number and take a look at those metrics. And we're going to start with ball striking, which this is where you can find your ball striking poppers. And the reason why this is where I start my research process is because it's the most consistent part of golf from round to round. How you're hitting it, you're actually swinging it off the tee and on approach is something that is relatively repeatable. So guys like a Kurt Kitayama that, for example, gained 4.5 strokes ball striking are the sort of players that I could see continuing that. But a Keegan, a Nico, they had really good ball striking days, but unfortunately played themselves out of it on Thursday, so they did not make the cut. But a Semi Valimaki, a Ben Griffin, a Sahith Thagala, that you can see all 3 of these guys also lost strokes with the putter, were some of the best players, in particular with the approach play yesterday. And if they could even just be a neutral in those short game categories, could have quite the improvement from round to round. So let me actually, let's bring it up to the side so you guys can see the names for this section of the video. But a few other guys that were popping would be an Adam Scott, an Aldrich Potgeider, also hit the ball well. Only made 3 birdies though, because he also really fell cold with the short game. But the glimmer of hope for some of these guys that lost strokes around the green and putting is that part of golf is extremely variance. It's the part of golf that can really just flip overnight. You'll see guys that will gain 3 strokes one day and then lose 4 to 5 strokes the next. And then vice versa, guys that go from losing to mega gainers the next day. And if they can continue to hit the ball like they did the day before, and again, that's the more consistent part of golf, then you can see how you can find some of your spike performances here. So, for example, even though they're not maybe grading out as well as some of the other top-end players, even these guys in like the 2 shots gained range, like a Schauffele, a McIlroy, a Fleetwood, a Lowry, a Fitzpatrick, etc., are all players that I'm going to give a little bit of a slight bump to. But the one thing to be a little careful about is that your top 5 on ball striking, and in particular your approach play, always tends to get a little bit of extra steam. So, for example, Valimaki gaining 3.5 approach. A lot of people are probably going to talk that up in some of the circles around the industry. So maybe he gets an extra 2 to 3% ownership because of that. Or Kurt Kitayama, him being number 1 in ball striking, not just the approach play being excellent, that maybe gets him an extra 4 to maybe even 5% ownership in contests. These are guys that I still think are usable, but you at least want to know that aspect. Know that you're not going to be the only one that are looking at them. And the ones that I prefer a little bit more, especially because I'm a large field 150 max player, are the guys that are in that like 5 to 10 range that still hit the ball extremely well with some of the best players that you had in the field, but that maybe aren't catching as much late steam. So that's the ball striking. And then if we take a look at the short game stats, this is where we might want to fade some of the guys that really played well and then try and target the players that are due for some short game regression. So, for example, although Bridgman is a really, really good short game player, and I guess if anyone was going to keep this up for a couple days in a row, it would be him. He gained 6 strokes between the around the green and the putting. And I think even he would tell you, because he seems like an extremely honest cat, that he's probably not going to do that for Saturday and Sunday. So these are the kind of guys that can come back down to earth a little bit. Marco Penge has had multiple good short game days in a row as well. And I love Penge. I mean, I took him for the top 20 this week as one of our value plays in DFS. But for him to gain 5 strokes between the short game categories every single day is blasphemous. That is just not going to happen. So, these sort of players, it's not to say that they can't still finish top 5 or even win this thing given their positioning, but it's going to have to be the ball striking that turns for them. And unfortunately for those 2 players, they lost strokes on approach, which is the most important category that we have in all of golf. So short game popping does happen, but it's very unpredictable, which means, some of these players that we have here, you probably don't want to tail for multiple days in a row. So a Homa I'd throw into that conversation. He also lost an approach, a Max Grazerman too. Fortunately for us, we talked about Max yesterday. Both of the Maxes actually, course history on Homa and also the ball striking on a Grazerman, but they didn't do it in the same way. Both of them hit the ball well for round number 1, but then did it with the short game the next day. And if they had actually continued to hit the ball well, like they did for Thursday, I mean, they could have had nuclear low performances. And so that is what can break open a showdown slate. So kind of weird that they're flipping their, shots gained profile as much as they did. But yeah, I probably won't be using them as much in round 3 because of that. And if you take a look at the around the green, it's a lot of the same. These guys that chipped in multiple times, that is not something that's going to be sustainable from round to round. Whereas if we go to the bottom end of the putting list, players that lost a whole bunch on the greens could be due for a little bit of a bounce back. So, for example, my guy Victor, who I was expecting a lot more from this week, he lost over 3 strokes with the putter. That was the clear issue for him. And oftentimes, these guys will go from losing 3 strokes putting to gaining like 2 strokes into the positive. And if he does that, is about an even ball striker again, that's going to be one of the better rounds that you have in the field, just based on that one category alone. And a lot of these other guys missed the cuts. But Rio was a half-decent ball striker. You can see was about a neutral between those 2 categories, but lost 2.5 strokes short game. So if he cleans that up, could be a better day. Valimaki was a ball striking popper that we saw, but also a short game regression candidate because he lost over 3 strokes in the short game categories. You don't want to be doing this with somebody that was absolutely trash with how they were hitting it. Fortunately for us, a lot of those guys ended up missing the cut, so we don't have to worry about them. But as long as they were about a neutral ball striking, and if they lost a whole bunch short game, you're going to see me getting to a lot of those players for bounce backs. And there will be a few exceptions to that rule. Like Arico Hoey, I don't usually call a short game regression candidate because he putts like Stevie Wonder. He's one of the worst putters on the PGA Tour. Him regressing is him maybe only losing 1.5 strokes to the field. Daniel Berger, for example, somebody that I've almost like taken off my short game regression list because like a Hoey too, he putts like he's blind out there and has no idea what he's doing. But if it's somebody with a pulse that will gain strokes putting some weeks and then lose strokes the next, Those are the kind of players that I think really make sense for that. So those are the round 2 metrics, but those aren't the end all be all. Remember course history. And just to remind you guys, on that spreadsheet from before, we have an entire tab for course history. So if you guys want to deep dive who's played well at Riviera, you have every single player in the field to work with. Just keep in mind that 2025 was not at this golf course. So it's mostly these other 4 that you want to look at. Also, you can find some of the high upside players on Bet the Number, just to show you guys that. If you go to the round props tab, which is up here on the top right, I'll open it in another tab for you. If you scroll down to the bottom, and I've showed this off a few times, but I think it's just the absolute nuts for people trying to do their own research. But if you go down here, you can change the sample size to whatever you'd like it to be, but we're going to keep it at 24 just so we don't have to load it here on the stream. But if you sort this by birdie average, you can see who's been the best player at just making raw birdies. And because we don't have placement points in play for round 3 showdown, this should be something that you're looking at. And, you know, maybe you change it to the last 12 rounds, maybe you change it to the last 100 and you take more of a long-term sample size. You can play around with it and figure out what works the best for you. I normally like the last 24 rounds. I think it's a good mix of recent form and some of the longer term form, but this will give you a way to try and find some of those aggressive players. So don't sleep on that. And of course, on the Patreon page, you guys can see all the guys that I'm using. But let's go through any deep dives that you guys have in the chat, any players that you guys are curious about. And then afterwards, if you guys are here for the prop and the betting side of things, that's where we're going to go through all of that. So just stay tuned for that. I've already entered 3 slips on the pick'em side of things, a couple head-to-heads on the sports books as well. And we've got about, 50 minutes until lock at this point. So plenty of time to go through those before lock ends up happening. So stay tuned for that. Any bets, you guys can throw those in the chat and I'll go through them a little bit later on. But let's catch up on any DFS questions or player pool deep dives. And if you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. This is the biggest live stream that we've ever had on the channel. I see 220 of you sweaty tryhards in here, which is just absolutely nuts. I didn't think there were 220 people researching every single showdown slate. I know people watching it after the fact normally get a couple thousand views, but that's still pretty nuts. Let's run up those like button numbers if you guys haven't already. But let's catch up on the questions and see where we left off on those, because as you guys know, I do not like skipping anything. We had a question about sitting in the top 10 of the sand trap. He said, would I rather be at the top or chasing going into the weekend? I'd rather be in the top 10 like you are. I mean, you're still going to need a good weekend to cash out. But if you're starting, let's say in like 100th or 200th place, that's more points that you have to make up. So ideally, I'd rather be towards the top. And I get the sentiment though, right? It always feels like the leaderboards change so much in DFS that you don't want to be at the top. There's a little bit of truth to that, but I've won 3 GPPs going wire to wire, being the leader after round 1 in a big 150 max contest, and then continuing that for the next 3 days. So it's something that can happen. It's a little bit rare. It's happened a lot less for me than comeback wins that I've had. But yeah, good spot, man. And I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully you can take that down. That's a pretty big payout, if memory serves me correctly. He said, let's have a day. Amen to that. Let's get a sip of this drink because my mouth is getting a little bit dry. I appreciate the love, Brady. Thank you for that. Can we do a deep dive on Noren and Gerard? Absolutely. And by the way, Jay, one of the regulars around here, welcome on in, my dude. So we got gaining on approach, gaining off the tee, and then he lost some with the putter. This is a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10 stat profile, because ideally we want guys that are gaining ball striking. It's not like he gained crazily, just over a stroke between those categories, but that's still pretty solid. And then he lost with the short game, so perhaps a little bit of short game regression there. And while Ryan Gerard isn't the most consistent putter on tour, and maybe that's a bit of a red flag, he is really good on POA. In fact, he's one of the best putters in the world on POA, gaining about 0.75 strokes per round. So yeah, I would expect him to turn that around sooner rather than later. So you can go, 6.5 out of 10, I'd say. And then let's look at Alex Noren too, who was a little bit more short game dependent, but also gained 1.6 with the approach play. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. I was tempted to say a 5 out of 10, but he still gains strokes to the field. He's still a relatively good course fit at a course that's well-rounded like this. So yeah, I'll give him a 6 out of 10. And I guess I'll revise the first rating to 7 out of 10 because he is a significantly better ranking from the shots gained metrics. Let's see, you're feeling Mav, but back at Showdown or the Mav Blues. Yeah, I had him in a few lineups too, but hey, it's only one player. I definitely don't get sad about one guy. Who's the nuke Showdown play of the day? I wish I knew, man. If I had a crystal ball and I could look into it and tell you, I would let you know. But I don't know. We're going to go through a lot of guys I think make sense. You can pick your favorite and go with it. I definitely don't have a favorite. Like, that's just not something I do. If I had one I thought was the best play of the slate, I'd give it to you, but I literally don't. It's not something that really goes through my mind. Let's see, trying to find some questions here. have I seen anything about lift clean in place for round 3? That's not something that they're going to announce until as play starts. So no, have not seen anything on that. If I had to guess, they're not going to use lift clean in place. It seems relatively dry out there. They had some balls running out in the fairways. I'd be pretty shocked if they went with that. You're looking at Wyndham for the over and birdies at 4.5. He's at 4 and better. So if you have access to the pick'em sites like better, I would rather take him at 4, but plus 100 seems pretty reasonable on that. Let's see. You asked a question a couple of days ago. Is there a way to send you a message if you don't want to respond publicly? You were just commenting. So yeah, Star, I saw your question on another video. It was just a ridiculous question about like being banned from the sports books. You can message me on Twitter, I guess, but I don't know. I'm not going to type out paragraph responses, and really even on X/Twitter either. So I don't know. You can ask your question here. I have no problems answering any questions publicly, but if it's a silly question, I'm not going to answer it. I just don't like wasting my time on it, to be frank with you. What's going on, Mr. Tar Heels? I haven't seen you in here in quite some time. He said, Scotty's surely going to shoot -8 today. He's probably going to shoot at least -5. I mean, his sportsbook line is 66.5, so that's -4.5 right there. I know he's juiced towards the over, but yeah, he's got a low one in him today. I'd say at least -3, -4, probably gaining 2 or 3 strokes to the field is what you can expect from him. He said, extremely informative shows. Thank you. And can we do a deep dive on Sahith? Absolutely. So let's go to the Thagala metrics. He gained ball striking, which is a really good sign for Sahith. He could be a bit inconsistent there, but lost in the short game categories. This is a great stat profile for Sahith. In fact, I don't think we could find a better stat profile for him heading into round number 3. And that combined with some solid course history has him as one of the better plays for Showdown. So I could definitely see that. Let's see. He said entrance in the $1 to $3, 1 through 20 contests seem to be guys with badges/experience. Let's say, are you better off playing the flagship 150s? So I'll give you some information on that, man. Just because somebody has a badge/experience does not mean they're good at DFS. I mean, I got my first badge on Draftkings like the first week that I played for taking down. It wasn't even like a big GPP, and I got the full experience badge. Those mean nothing, man. I'd say the 150 max contests do have more casuals in them because they have the big payouts the first. And, you know, your slapdick players that have no idea what the fuck they're doing on DFS, they see, oh, 100K to first. Oh, 50K to first. Let me enter into that one. Not realizing that they're playing against people with 150 lineups. So if you're willing to play 150 lineups, then I think playing in those makes sense. But if you're only going to enter 20 lineups, because I know you said the 1 to 20 maxes, right? If you're only going to enter 20 lineups into that, then absolutely not. Then you should be entering the 20 max contest. So it's a nuanced question. I first play the 150 maxes because I get in. Like, I mean, that's part of my process is knowing that you're going to get the people sitting on their shitters playing Showdown that have quite literally no idea what they're doing, that are almost just free money at that point. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and it depends on whether you're willing to invest in 150 lineups, because unless it's like a 50 cent 150 max contest, it's going to cost quite a bit of money to max enter those contests. So it's not something that everyone can do. He said Griffin deep dive. Let's look at that. So yeah, he hit the ball well, but didn't really do anything with his short game other than chipping in on hole 17, which was massive for me. I needed him to make that eagle like air yesterday, and he did. But he gained on approach. He gained off the tee, then lost 1.4 putting. It's a 7 out of 10 stat profile. And the only reason I would, keep him from being an 8.5 or even a 9 is that chip in. Chipping in is not something you're going to do every single round. Should you be nervous about using Vegas? And thanks as always. I got you. Let me get my camera back up there. I clicked the wrong thing. So Johnny Vegas hit the ball well. So I know why you're looking at him. Or sorry, hit the ball well in round 1, I'm guessing, and then kind of fell off in round 2. Yeah, I'd be scared about using him for round number 3. He was short game dependent, and he gained strokes with the approach. Lost strokes with the approach play. Yeah, it's like a 2 out of 10 stat profile. So yeah, I mean, based on the shots gained metrics, you'd want to stay away, but that's not your entire process. I mean, if you have metrics that you're looking at that are getting you onto Vegas, I guess there's a time and place for it, but now he's going to be a little bit higher owned, maybe not even a little bit higher owned. He's going to be significantly higher owned than what he was for main slate. And he's still the same price there at the bottom end of the board. So if you were not looking at him for main slate and then now you're looking at him, I just don't think it's the time to buy in. Whereas if you liked him for main slate, you have something in your process that's really getting you onto Vegas, then maybe you could see yourself getting onto him. But I personally am not in that camp, right? I do not expect him to be that good this weekend. He said, the player pool seems to be, yeah, you've already asked your question. By the way, do not have to ask twice. I will go through everything in chat eventually. Can we deep dive Aubert in Nap? I got you. So let's go through Aubert first. So Aubert gained on approach, lost off the tee, then was okay short game. He's still kind of off to me. Like, I know last week he really rebounded for Friday through Sunday. Would not surprise me if he did that for Saturday, Sunday here, though. I mean, he's shown us that he's capable of putting it together for an 18-hole sample size. Just hasn't necessarily done it so far this week. So, yeah, I'm going to give him a 5.5 out of 10. Just because the approach play, the most important category in golf, was where he carried his game in round number 2. And then the other one was Knapp, right? Knapp, another long player off the tee. He gained across all 4 categories, but he did gain most significantly with the putter. So I want to give him a 7 out of 10 because he was just solid across the board. But because he was short game dependent and those 3 strokes into the positive, I'm going to have to regress him down to a 5. Now, does that mean that he's unplayable? No. Like, Jake Knapp was somebody that I was really high on heading into this week. He's a high birdie percentage player. He's somebody that, is a good course fit. So if you want to use that as your narrative, right, that's why I liked him so much for this sort of week, then you could still get onto him. But the shots gain metrics have him as an average play at best, I would say. But a little bit better on the first player there, Aubert, is that Decky seems like a nuke waiting to happen. Yeah, it's just who he is. He's somebody that's extremely volatile. And I mean, he's won twice over the last 6 months. So there's a lot crazier plays they can get to than Hideki Matsuyama. Unfortunately, I did want to point this out, though. He did lose about 3 strokes with the approach play. So, a slight negative, but not big enough of a negative that it makes him unplayable. Let's see what's going on. Mr. J Smooth, he said, thanks for the show. Thank you for the kind comment. He said, deep dive on Hovland and Harman. He said, you're looking at them for negative round play. He said, hate watch candidates for overs. I like your style there, man. The hate watching for overs. Let's look at Harman. So Harman, yeah, it's just kind of like average across the board. I'm kind of fading Harman today. So I'll give you the fade a little bit later on. It's a play on a head-to-head, and I'm taking against him. And let's look at Hovland. I don't know if I could hate watch Hovland. I just like him too much, especially because he lost 3.4 strokes with a putter. So yeah, I could see Hovland turning around, but Brian Harman, who I call the Hobbit, or I should say I got that from my guy DGen, my friend James. DGen75, as you guys know, used to always call him the Hobbit. I could get behind hate watching the Hobbit. He takes way too much time. He's short. There's a lot to pick on there. Let's put it that way. He said, thoughts on Denny going out solo to start round 3? So yeah, there's a lot of people that like the solo starters. I'll sometimes play them and just hope that they go off hot. I guess the idea is for anyone that's newer to golf is that if you're playing by yourself, you get to set your own pace, especially if it's not 3 sums off of both tees, which it's 2 sums off of 1 today. I mean, he could play his round in 2.5 hours if he wants to. He could play the round in 4 hours if he wants to. I mean, he could take his time and play it at his normal pace. But what's beautiful is that they're not waiting on other people. They can just be completely dialed in on their process. Some people get into a groove. I mean, you saw Wesley Bryan play his round in, I think, like an hour and 50 minutes. The fastest round ever in the PGA Tour, and he shot like -5. So I'm not saying they have to speed golf it or anything, but it could be advantageous for some of those guys. For some of them, I'm sure it makes no difference, but we've seen it work out for those players before. Said Wyndham Clark versus Kurt Kitayama on the deep dive. I'll look at those. So Clark, I'd say, would be more of like a long-term play. He's a high upside guy. He gained ball striking, though. So that's maybe a 6.5 out of 10 stat profile right there. Kurt Kitayama striped it, but it feels like you're chasing, right? If you're getting to a Kurt Kitayama after he shot -7, he did gain the most strokes ball striking out of anyone in the field, but he also gained almost 2 strokes with the putter. So the stat profile, I'm still going to give him an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. I mean, it would be unfair to just like dock him because he had such a good day, but it does feel a little bit unsustainable on that one. What's going on? It's a favorite value play today. I don't really do favorite plays. So we mentioned a few that I think make sense. I'd say pick your favorite of the bunch and go with it. I said morning streams might be the move. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that we can get as many people to watch the replay. So, and I like to make sure that everyone has a chance to watch the content if possible. So we're probably going to keep them at night for the most part, but a morning stream every once in a while didn't hurt anyone. He said the DGen75 is looking down at smiling at us today. Amen to that. So let's all have a great day with him in mind. Cheers to that. And I know he was a cold brew guy, and I'm just drinking some iced coffee here, but maybe I'll get a cold brew tomorrow or even later this afternoon. I'm a multiple coffee kind of guy, so maybe we'll do that with him in mind. He said, how did I hit him yesterday? Oh boy. Let's not talk about that. I'm kidding. I played horribly. I played horribly the last like 5 times I've golfed. I've shot 80 plus the last times I've golfed. I'm a 7 handicap, so that's not good. I guess that's kind of on par, but it's not good. I've shot 70s multiple times before. Got to play with Jeremy Rauch, though, who's going to be on most likely on the Corn Ferry Tour next year. At the worst is going to be on the Hotel Planet Tour. That's the tour just under the DP World Tour on the Eurogolf side of things. He's already guaranteed to be over there next year. Got to play with him. We had the TrackMan out. We were dicking around. I was hitting 162 ball speed, which is a lot higher than I've had for quite some time. Unfortunately, those 162 ball speeds and the 270 carries were landing multiple fairways over. So I don't know whether it was like the mental thing of me wanting to impress, my buddy, he's so good at golf, or for me just wanting to run up the numbers on the shot tracker and to, kind of just hit it off the planet. But it was not a good day from the scoring standpoint, but it was a heck of a good time. That's for sure. He said, it's the time of the show. Amen. He said, Tom Kim, deep dive, please, brother. Okay, let's take a look at that. Yeah, I haven't looked that much at Tom Kim, so I'm assuming the ball striking was but he did gain. He gained about a stroke between those two categories and then lost 1.7 putting. So it's not flashy. So that's why it didn't catch my eye maybe as much as some of the other players that you had in the field. But this is like a 6.5 maybe a 6.5 out of 10 stat profile, because he's doing it the way we want to, just not drastically, right? He's not gaining 2 strokes ball striking. He's not losing the 2 strokes into the negative with the putter, but still, I'd say some positive signs heading into Saturday. And, I hope that Tom Kim can keep it going, man. He's one of my favorite players, one of the best personalities on tour. This unfortunately has not been playing his best recently. Welcome on in, Mr. Kevin. I think I saw some of your bets on Twitter the other day, so hopefully those continue to go well for you. If that's the same person, it might not be. Happy for you getting the live stream love. Can I please deep dive Fox? Appreciate that, by the way, Mr. Z King. Yeah, we can go through some Foxy. Foxy lost on approach. He gained off the tee and he gained around the green, but lost putting. So this is one of those up and down roller coaster kind of stat profiles where we have to call it a 5 out of 10. We can't really hurt him. We can't say that it was a bad day. We can't say it was really a good day either. What I will say, though, about Ryan Fox, it has nothing to do with these round 2 stats, is his bomber. He takes advantage of the par 5s. He's a decent around the green player, too. You can see he gained around the green at least in round number 2. So he's a good course fit. So if there's, a time and place to use him, I'd say it would be Showdown, where we need to get a nuclear low performance, especially as one of the higher upside plays that we have in the field. So yeah, somebody I used in main slate, and I'm surely hoping that he keeps it going. So thanks for the stream. Can we deep dive Harman? Yeah, so I should use the deep dive on Harman a bit earlier, but he was about neutral in all those different categories. Let's do a U breakdown. I got you. So Kevin U missed the cut, so I'm not sure why we're breaking him down, but he lost in 3 of the 4 categories. So yeah, don't have to worry about him, though, as he does not have a tee time for today. Haven't looked at the pin placement. Have any thoughts on how the course will play? Yeah, so I'm going to mention that with the prop side of things. I'll expand on it, but the pin locations look about the same. Like they don't look like a moving day pin setup to me. Like today, I should say yesterday. Normally it's today when we're doing these late night live streams. But yesterday, the pin locations were really easy. And we kind of saw that coming. We went through the pin locations and anticipated that. They look about the same difficulty for tomorrow. So I'm not saying that they're hard. They probably will be hard for Sunday. That's probably where they'll ramp up the difficulty, but it's not like it's going to be easier than what it was for yesterday. And I think it may actually play harder scoring average wise. And this is something that I'm going to talk about with the prop section, but the lift clean in place is not a guarantee today. It was rolling out. Like I did not see any mud balls yesterday from what I was able to see on the broadcast. Granted, I played golf for a lot of the round yesterday, so I had to watch it on my phone on the side. And from what I saw when I got home with the highlights, but it did not seem like mud balls. Obviously they were cleaning the ball off, so we wouldn't know if there were that many mud balls, but I didn't see any mud balls out of the rough or anything like that. You said you feel like every time you fade or you're underweight on Scotty under Saturday or Sunday, you regret it. Is it just too obvious or to be overweight on Scotty? A little bit of a mouthful there, but I get what you're saying. And fill in around him. I don't think it's too obvious of a play. I think Scotty Scheffler is totally fine to use. I would say that the first part of your question where you're kind of psyching yourself out is where you're going wrong on this, right? You should be evaluating Scotty Scheffler like every other player in the field. The only difference is the price tag, right? You have to use him, and then you can't play another 9, 10K range guy around him. I'd say he's usable. There's opportunity cost involved with avoiding that 9K range, but don't psych yourself out, man. I mean, there are guys that I probably get wrong more than others, but this is the mindset of an elite tier athlete. Right? I'm not an elite tier athlete, but I do consider myself an elite tier better and DFS player. You got to flush the mistakes. You cannot hang around in your head. It is not doing you any good holding on to that kind of shit. And I mean, I get things wrong all the time, but as soon as the slate ends, I track my results, digest it, maybe give myself 5 minutes to get pissed if I have a bad day, and that shit gets flushed. Because as soon as you start to have those thoughts like, oh, I never get Scotty right, or oh, like you're wasting energy and you're wasting mind space on something that's not being productive. So just something to keep in mind is like maybe try to like not focus on that kind of stuff because I don't think it's productive. Like, for example, like I still even say this, and I shouldn't even say this now because I guess it's like me proving the point was like, I hate Cantlay, and I like sometimes don't bet on him because of that. But anytime I have that that like urge in the back of my mind to go like, oh, I never get Cantlay right, immediately nip it in the bud. I go, that's fucking bullshit. That's stuff that is what weak people say to themselves, right? So you flush it, you put it down, and then you just look at it from a completely different view. That's the best way to look at that, in my opinion. Can I deep dive Hisatune? For sure we can. He lost a bunch putting today, so that was his main issue. It's not like he was great ball striking, though. He was only a neutral between those two categories. But the short game, losing about 2.5 strokes between the around the green and the putting, is not something he's going to do every day, especially because he's been a lot better over the last month and on POA. So yeah, I like him for a short game regression candidate. He kind of fits that stat profile from a DFS perspective. Can we do a deep dive on Lowry? You said you think that he beats Ben G today. Benny's got a good stat profile, but I believe Lowry does too. So that's not without reason to say that. Yeah, you can see Lowry. He gained about 2 strokes ball striking in round 2, then lost putting. I mean, it's almost the same stat profile as a Benny G, right? So if you were going to pick Lowry, I don't think that's completely crazy. I will say, though, that Ben Griffin's a pretty hard guy to pick on. Like, he's a tough character. So I think that'll be a good one either way. It'll be a pretty close matchup, I'd say. Is this tournament still wide open from an outright perspective? Yes, it is. He said with Rory being out top of the leaderboard, it feels different. Rory's the clear favorite, and the sports books are going to reflect that with the odds. But it's wide open when you have guys like Xander there. You've got even very experienced players like Scott that have played so well at this golf course in the past. And then don't forget about your like Fleetwoods, your Fitzpatricks that are 5 shots off the lead. A good moving day, a -5, but -6 round, and they're going to be within striking distance of that lead. I would say, though, the only way that this is not wide open tomorrow is if Rory shoots -8. If Rory goes nuclear low, then yeah, it could be over. That I would say he's really the only one that I'm worried about that. You know, I love Marco. Marco Polo, as I call him. I love even the Bridgman. He's somebody that we played quite a bit over the last year in DFS. But I don't expect them to shoot -8. Like, if they do it, then yeah, the tournament might be over too. But Rory McIlroy is the one to worry about there. Can we deep dive on Clark and Pendrith? So we did the Clark one a bit earlier, so hopefully you caught that. But Pendrith gained off the tee, lost on approach, and then lost around the green and gained putting. So this is another one of those up and down profiles that'll give a 5 out of 10. He's a bomber, which I tend to like at this course, especially with it playing softer and a bit longer from the scorecard perspective this year. But yeah, the shots gained profile is probably a 5 out of 10. And Clark was a little bit better than a 5 out of 10. He was somebody that I think was a little short game dependent, but also hit the ball decently. Keep a deep dive Straka for sure. Little Sep. I think we're going to deep dive almost the entire field at this point, but hey, that's okay. That's what we're here for. So we got about 2 strokes gained with the approach play. That's the most important category. So that's an especially good sign. Did lose off the tee, which is a bit concerning. He's not a long player, so that likely means that he missed a few too many fairways. He was about a neutral with the putter. And round 1, it was a similar story. He gained ball striking, but he lost with the putter. So whenever he has that spike day and maybe gains 2 to 3 strokes, he's going to be pretty close to that optimal lineup. So I think Sep sets up pretty well. Valamaki's got a good shots gained profile. You got like 3 strokes gained into the positive on approach. So not going to show that off again, but he was a solid 6.5, 7 out of 10. Of course, Kep, I've got you. Let's look at a Finau deep dive. So Tony Finau, good course history. Last year he did finish well here, but that was obviously not at Riviera. He gained off the tee, lost on approach, and then gained around the green and lost putting. So 5 out of 10. It's just, you can't really learn anything from guys that are gaining and losing just across the board, about as 50-50 as it gets. But this is the sort of player that started to turn it around in 2026. I mean, he fell off the face of the earth towards the end of last year. I think there was some sort of an injury going on that he missed some time for, but he looks healthy. He's at a golf course that fits his game. And last week, he was the #1 putter in the field. So although he did lose strokes putting yesterday, he could turn it around and gain 2 strokes to the field real quickly based on how he's been playing recently. So yeah, I think Finau is somebody that at least I like for tomorrow. Scotty outright, he's 100 to 1. I can't do it. I just think he's too far back, man. I don't think it's that wide open. Like, I think it's still, there are guys within reason 6, maybe 5 shots back that could win this. But Scotty 10 strokes back. I mean, I hate to say never, but like, I just don't see it. There are too many good players at the top
that are going to conceivably shoot -5 to -6 over the next day, that Scotty would have to shoot -8, -8 to have any chance at winning. And that's probably not enough because, I mean, think about Rory here. If he shoots -8, -8, which is an incredible round, by the way, at Riviera, especially on Sunday with the Sunday pins, it's going to be really hard to do that tomorrow. But if Rory shoots -5, he's at that number, which is less than what Scotty has to do on both days to get to that score. That's why I wouldn't bet that. Yeah, all good. Some people are going to play those guys this week, though. So it's going to be kind of funny if they do so. He said, good morning, Luke. You got Thigala, McCarty for the deep dive. So we did the Thigala one earlier, but I will go through McCarty. You said McCarty, not McCarthy, right? So let me double check that. Yeah, you said McCarty. So McCarty lost off the tee, gained on approach, and then he lost around the green and gained putting. So another one of those up and down stat profiles. And we've had a few of those players in a row now that we can't glean that much from. But here's what I'll say. The one category that he was the best in was the most important category that we have in golf, and that is the approach play. So I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Rather than the 5 out of 10 splitting it down the middle on the up and down profile, we'll give him a slightly better than normal just because it was the approach play that was the best. It's a great advice. Got to let it go, win or lose. Yeah, it's the case in everything in life, but I think especially in like DFS or things where you're doing analysis, getting hung up on stuff like that it's just not productive, in my opinion. He said, they had to have been Kevin Yu himself in my chat asking for the breakdown. Hey, if it was Kevin, you just did not play well. And I think he knows that. You said, thinking that there's some value backing Rio in the 2-ball. Yes, I do. In fact, I bet that. So we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. In fact, both of you guys have pointed out the 2-ball bets that I like for today. So it seems like we're in agreement on those, and we'll go through them together here in a minute. Yeah, we went through the Tony deep dive, so hopefully that helped you on that one. Can we look at more Kaba? You're nervous to play him after winning last week. So this is another example of like, the weird stuff that we do to ourselves mentally when we're doing analysis. That does not matter. In fact, the fact that he won last week is a good thing because he's playing the best form and some of the best golf that he's had. I would say the concern for that could have been like round 1, the hangover. And he's not a big drinker, so I'm not talking about like an actual hangover for Collin Morikawa, but the emotional hangover of having that win, celebrating, spending some time with your friends and family for the next few days. Maybe that impacts him for the first round, but now we're on round number 3. So I think you're good there. And from the shots gained perspective, he was about a neutral in all 4 categories. So I don't think we can learn that much from it. But despite that, and despite maybe having that quote unquote hangover the first couple of days, he's sitting at T16. So I wouldn't be that worried about it. Maybe he could run out of steam. I just want to spitball that idea because it's possible, but I wouldn't worry about it. He seems like a pretty in shape guy that should have his energy levels up. He said this course historically has played as penal, but would I characterize it as more balanced with the softer conditions, or would I say that it's a birdie fest? It's a balanced course. Great question, by the way. Definitely not a birdie fest because it still has some teeth to it. And without Live Clean in place today, I don't think it's going to play nearly as easy. So we're going to talk more about that from the prop side of things. But even under the easiest possible conditions, and that's what we're getting at this course right now, no wind, rain, and Live Clean in place, it only played -1.5. I mean, most other tracks on the PGA Tour, you give them that kind of setup, and they're going to score to a -3 or -4 scoring average. So that shows you the kind of teeth that it has, and that's why it's hosting the Olympics in a couple years, and also why it's hosting a U.S. Open in 2031. So completely agree on it being like a middle-of-the-road course this week, but normally a lot harder. Have I played this course before? I have not. I want to, though. I've only been out to LA twice in my life before, so maybe the next time I get out there, if I can get, a hookup to play Riviera, I absolutely will, but that's a hard tee time to get. Welcome on in, Mr. Reaper. All the best today. Amen to you. He said, it feels terrible if you had one of those 20 cuts in your lineups. That mistake is almost unforgivable. It's not, no. There's 20 guys that missed a cut out of 72, right? That's, doing some mental math, that's like 20, like almost 30% of the field that ended up missing the cut. It's not unforgivable in that, dude. I had plenty of guys that missed the cut this week, especially as a 150 max player. So that's just I don't know. I was talking to my pro golfer friend, by the way, yesterday, and we were laughing our asses off about this. And when you talk to pro golfers about this, I think this is the thing that they laugh the most about with fans is like the 8-foot make percentage. I was like, dude, all these people on my live streams are like in my Discord, and I'm not making fun of you guys too much here, but a little bit. They'll get mad at guys for missing like 20-foot birdie putts or missing like 12-foot birdie putts, not knowing that the make percentage on a 20-foot putt is like 10% at best.
even on a 12-foot birdie putt, it's like a 30% make percentage for these tour players. You got to cut them some slack. Like just like this week, 70% of the field made the cut. There's still 30% of the field that didn't make it. And there were guys like JJ Spawn that missed the cut. You had like legit guys like Scotty Scheffler almost missed the cut. He had to make an 8-footer to make it to the weekend. You're being far too harsh on the guys that missed the cut. It's a strong field, and I know it's a bigger cut than normal, but you're crazy, my dude. It's just like the people like clowning the guys for missing 8-foot putts. Like they wouldn't make 1 out of 10 of those. Most of the people saying that. He said, thank you, Luke. He said, I'm the absolute best. I appreciate that, Mr. Roman. Best of luck with everything that you're going with today. How am I feeling about Fitz? I'm worried about the approach play on Fitzpatrick. He had been striping it for the last couple events, and I guess, sorry, the off the tee play is what I meant to say. But he lost on approach round 1. That was the concern for me for the most part of Fitzpatrick. And round 2, he turned that around, but then lost off the tee. I'm wondering whether he's running out of steam, because the reason why I thought Fitzpatrick was a great play this week and why I used him in lineups, and I'm not regretting that. He's still in a good spot so far, but it's because of the approach play. I mean, he had been his best approach week ever last week. He gained 4.2 the week before that, which was one of the better weeks that he had had for quite some time. But now it's been a little bit more inconsistent. So I still like Fitz. I still think he sets up well for this event, but I'm a little concerned that he's running out of steam. Can I take someone to shoot -3 like Fleetwood or Cam Young and just stick to the -2s, like going back to the Fowler? We'll talk through the prop side, but I'm not sure that strokes is the way to go about it, especially if we don't know whether it's lift clean in place or not. If we get the announcement of lift clean in place, then I think that could make sense, Golf Kid, but without it, you might actually be playing some negative EV props there. Is it Clark's or Putt Guider for the deep dive? I did the Clark one earlier, so hopefully you can check that one out. Maybe go back in the video and you can find that. Putt Guider, we also did one on, but he gained ball striking and lost short game. So Putt Guider is a 7 out of 10, and I believe Clark was like a 6 out of 10. He said, you were looking at Putt Guider too. Okay. Thoughts on guys like Putt Guider, Vegas, and Grazerman. So we've already done deep dives on all 3 of those players. So you can check those out a little bit earlier in the live stream. You might just be joining us, but we've deep dived almost every player in the field, and we've got to get onto the prop and the betting side now. So let's do that before the round ends up getting started on us. And I think there's some value for today, and it's in the categories that I'm a little bit more certain about. It played easier yesterday. It should still play easier today than what we had for round number 1. But there could be some variance involved here, because if they take away lift clean in place, the bogey average is going to go up. The stroke average is going to get a little bit worse. It's going to go up strokes wise. I do think, though, that the birdie average probably won't be as affected. And then the green average down here will be affected a little bit, but not nearly as much as some of these other categories. So what have I done at this point is I've mostly focused on the categories that we don't have that variance on. I've gone to birdies are better. I've gone to greens and regulation where I can. And I think I had 1 stroke prop that have entered at this point, but it was somebody at 69.5 strokes that only has to shoot -2. So let's say that the scoring average does get a little bit harder and maybe only plays like 0.75 to a stroke under par because they take away lift clean in place. Then that player only has to gain a stroke to the field to cover that sort of line. So that's personally where I think you guys should stay on this sort of a slate. And if you're just joining us, the weather looks beautiful for tomorrow. You're talking about sub 10 miles an hour of wind the entire day, almost no gust as well. And it's going to be a little bit warmer than you had for the day before. So I think that's also going to help conditions. But to go back to those averages, lift clean in place is sometimes worth 2 shots on the PGA Tour. I don't think it's going to be quite worth that much here. Probably be close to like a half a stroke or maybe a stroke difference if they take it away. But that's why I think if you're entering strokes props right now, that you're taking a bit of a gamble. And I know that this is obviously a gamble. We're betting on the pick'em sites and we're taking props and bets. But I don't look at a lot of my exposure as gambles because I only take things that I see as plus EV plays. And I try and take away as much variance as humanly possible when I'm betting. So that's why when I'm on a site here like Underdog, I was focusing on those sort of categories. And, based on the green average being like 12.5 per round, I thought that there were some overs that made sense for this category. Like, for example, I took a Xander Schauffele at even money for the over. I also took an over on Hideki Matsuyama for even money. Both of those have now bumped to 0.85x towards the over. So obviously being on the Patreon page pays and being able to get the same lines that I do. However, the point stands. There are other guys on here that I think also make sense for the over at 11.5. In fact, there could even be some guys that are juiced towards the under at 11.5, like
a Ludwig Gobert, like you're seeing here, that I think could make sense towards the over. So I haven't entered this one quite myself, and I probably won't force in any extra exposure just because I really like the stuff that I've already entered. But like a Ludwig Gobert would make plenty of sense from that perspective. And then because I think the birdie average will be less affected than some of the other categories, if they take away lift clean in place, it'll still be slightly affected, right? Don't get me wrong. Like it still has some sort of impact, but maybe a little bit less than some of the other ones. I took a look at some of these birdie or better props, and Siwoo Kim was an over that I really liked. And part of the reason for that, if we go to the round props tab and take a look at birdie percentage over the last 24 rounds, you're going to see that Siwoo Kim is number 2 in the field behind a Scotty Scheffler. So if I think the average is going to stay maybe about 4.25 per round, hole 10's easier, so maybe it does go slightly up there. Moving day pins, slightly warmer temperatures, maybe it goes up to like 4.5 per round. Then obviously the number 2 birdie maker in the field is somebody that I'll like towards the over at that 4.5 mark. So that was a prop that I took. The Ludwig Gobert one was not one that I've entered for myself, but something that Underdog has done, which is why we're going to focus on this for our exposure now, is they've juiced up the payouts. Even if this was another even money prop. So let's throw in 2 birdie or better overs, for example. Harris is not a prop that I'm telling you guys to tail, but look at the payout. It's 3.22x because they changed the payout structure for 2 and 3 band slips. So they boosted it up to 3.5x is the normal payout that you get for a 2-man. But even with correlation, like you're seeing here, like these two are correlated and they're birdie or better props, you're still getting a better payout than we would have gone before for anti-correlating props on Underdog. So I think that this change is the absolute nuts. It's personally where I'm going to be entering all my exposure for now, except for I had one better slip that I ended up going with. And on better, let me see if we can get those same numbers. And if so, I'll give you guys that exposure to tail too. So just 1 second while I check the board to see if both of those are at that same number. See, I'm hoping they are because I really liked what we got. And it looks like they are. So it was a Wyndham Clark over on 4 birdies or better. And then for strokes, this is the 1 strokes prop that I took, which I told you I'm a little iffy about because I'm not sure whether it's going to be lift clean in place or not. But even if it's not, it's an Akshay Bhatia under at 69.5. So I took those two together for 2.8x, which isn't ideal. It is still at least a little bit better than what Prize Picks is at. But the reason why we're taking those two on better and still taking the lower payout than like what you get for a 2-man on Underdog is the lines are different. You're getting 4 on Wyndham Clark, so giving us push equity at that 4 number. But I think the average is going to be 4.25 per round. Somebody that's an elite tier elite tier putter like him, an elite tier birdie or better percentage guy like Wyndham Clark is somebody I'll take with the push equity at that number. And then Akshay, he's got a 3rd place, a 6th place finish over his last couple starts. He started off fantastically this week, even in some really rough weather for round number 1. I know he fell off a bit yesterday, but shooting -2, gaining like a stroke to the field average. And let's say that it is lift clean in place. I mean, that I guess could happen, right? We don't know until the round's about to start whether we're going to get that or not. But if it is lift clean in place, him shooting -2 might only be having like an average day, which in that sort of case, that would be an absolute no-brainer. So I took that for 2.8x, kind of stoked that they still have that on better, especially because, you know, sites like Underdog here are bumping shit before I even have a chance to play it for myself. But let me see if the other birdie or better prop I took is available. And it actually is. So if you guys want to do this instead, I guess you could go this direction too. But I did like the Siwoo Kim over. You already mentioned that one. But I also took a Jordan Spieth over at 4.5. And sure, I know he's my favorite player. I try and find any reason possible to play Jordan Spieth props. But he's playing decent golf. He seems to be back. I know the wrist isn't bothering him anymore. And something else to consider for Jordan is that he's got the around the green play to take on the par 5s, try and get up and down for birdie at those. And then also at hole number 10 to hit a pretty good wedge shot there. And if he picks off 3, maybe 4 birdies on those holes, and then adds 1 to 2 elsewhere, that's how he can hit that over for us. And he was -132 towards the over on DraftKings. I believe Siwoo Kim was even money, which I just do not agree with. I mean, you saw number 2 birdie maker in the field over the last 24 rounds. Like, he should just not be priced lower than a lot of the other guys in the field. But Jordan Spieth was actually plus EV value towards the over on this one. And both of them have late tee times. Like, they're not going off in the first hour of tee times. Siwoo's got a 9:20 local. Jordan Spieth has a 10:30 local tee time, which is after the course is going to start to warm up a little bit. The ball's going to travel further, and I think it's going to help them out with their birdie or better percentage. But I do have to say that those green and regulation props that bumped were probably my favorites that you had on the board. So unfortunate that they took those off there, but maybe that Aubert one makes sense. Maybe you can line shop a few other ones at 11.5 that makes sense. And the beauty is with the payout change is even if it does have the multiplier on it, like I guess, we could look at the payouts, like with the multipliers, even at this point, like with a Xander and then one of those birdie or better props, it's still 2.75x if we were to take those together. this is like the same payouts that we used to get on correlated slips. So I don't think it's like the worst thing to even take at this point. But if you line shop a little bit, find some of those better 11.5s, that might make a little bit of sense too. But on Prize Picks at this point, I see no reason to play here. I know that they might have slightly more players, and I know they have this bogey or worse category that we can't get on some of the other books. But with the payouts being so much worse, I mean, just to show you guys, like 2 overs now here is 2.7x as opposed to 3.25x on Underdog. You're just shorting yourself money if you're playing on a Prize Picks at this point. So I'm not even going to waste my time looking at the Prize Picks board. And in fact, let's go over to the sportsbook side instead. So I promised you guys a couple of head-to-heads that I have for today, and I completely agree with you on the 2-ball against Harmon. Minus 115 is something that I bet on Rio Hisatune. He's due for some short game regression. He's also been playing a lot better golf than Brian Harmon heading in. And if you take a look at the odds on DraftKings, this is like minus 130. So this minus 115 number I thought was well worth playing. And who was the other one? It was the plus money one I took. It was Corey Connors. Corey Connors versus Nick Taylor. And we're getting Coco at plus 105, which I just disagree with. I think that this should be an even money coin flip. I know Corey Connors had the injury last year, but he's now about 7 months removed from having that injury. He should be a lot healthier than what he was before. And he's played well this week. He's hit the ball reasonably well. And Nick Taylor, on the other hand, the guy that he's playing against, and that is the favorite on that matchup, which I just don't agree with, was super short game dependent. He gained like 3.5 strokes short game between the around the green and the putting. So yeah, give me some Coco at plus money. I think he's also plus money in some of the other sports books. So unlike Rio, where we're getting the better number on Hard Rock Bet here, you're getting a similar number on Corey Connors elsewhere. So if you're somebody that only has access to like DraftKings, Fanduel, some of those sort of books, you could probably still tail Corey Connors. I think he was like plus 102 on DraftKings. So maybe not quite the same number, but pretty close there. And I'd say still worth playing. The real one, though, even at that minus 130 or minus 125, like he is on other sports books, might even still be worth playing at that sort of number too. But we already talked about the Rio stat profile having some short game regression. And it's the same thing, but on the opposite spectrum on the other one, right? Expecting Nick Taylor to come back down to earth a little bit and Corey Connors to continue to be his consistent self. But that's all I entered on the sports books for today. Those are actually the only 2 bets that I entered on a Hard Rock Bet. There's no 3 balls with the 2 sums off of 1. So that format just isn't going to exist. So I tried to find a few pieces of value that made sense. And I played them individually. I did not parlay them together. I guess if you did parlay them, it would be close to almost a plus 300 payout. But I like to go with the more consistent sort of ROI. I like to play them separately for the single bets. You know, the parlays, we get our fill on that on sites like Underdog, Prize Picks, Better, because we have to play parlays on those sort of sites, which is why on the sports books, I like to embrace that straight betting just a little bit more. But I think that's all we've got for this live stream. I am going to catch up with all of your questions and bets in the chat as well, which could take us another 10 to 20 minutes for all I know. You guys are just absolutely lighting up the chat today, which is a good problem to have, right? To have a lot of things to go through together. But anything that we haven't already gone through, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. But that's essentially what I'm looking at for today. We haven't gone through quite every single prop that I've entered here together, but there's going to be some other stuff that I enter after live stream here as well. If we see this look clean in place, I think that the strokes unders could be worth a few looks. In fact, because we're here on the live stream and I just want to see whether the PGA Tour has put anything out yet, we're within 10 minutes to lock. So this is about when the PGA Tour would post that sort of thing. Let's see if we have any information on that. So they still have the Saturday forecast. There's no rain in the forecast, and that's big for Live Clean in Place, right? If there was, let's say, like a 20 to a 30% chance of rain, that would exponentially increase the chances of there being Live Clean in Place. And because it's sunny and it's 60 degrees, I'm going to operate under the assumption that they're not using Live Clean in Place, which is why we're going to hold off on playing the strokes board until we get confirmation in either direction. But I guess this is something worth pointing out, especially like on Prize Picks. And I'm not going to enter anything on Prize Picks just out of like, what's the word for it? Principle. I just don't want to like give them action when they're scamming with the payouts at this point compared to some of the other sites. Like, let's almost like force them into changing the payouts themselves and adjusting to what they have on these other sites. But these strokes lines seem a little optimistic to me if there's no Live Clean in Place. Like, for example, some of these guys at 69 strokes, like a Nick Taylor, for example, who was short game dependent, and he's at 69 flat. Like, I could see myself taking his over on strokes if the Live Clean in Place is not announced, because that would put the scoring average at closer to like minus 0.75 to maybe -1, which means that he'd have to gain a stroke to the field just to push this sort of line. And Nick Taylor's an average to below average player in this sort of, maybe an average player is a more appropriate way to put it. But either way, I think that there could be some overvalue to take. And it's not just on Prize Picks, but better underdog, the same sort of story. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on here over the next 10 to 15 minutes, is whether we potentially have that value to attack. And if so, you'll see some of those slips over there on my Patreon page. But to tail everything I'm taking on underdog and prize picks, you guys can find that on the Patreon page as well. Golf prop and betting tier is how you guys get access to all of that. Not only every single slip that I'm entering, but also all of the stat averages for these rounds, also weather reports to help you out with your process, and also not just the bets that I'm taking, but all of the reasoning behind it as well. It'll teach you how to find value for yourself. It'll give you the rhyme and reasoning behind everything that I'm playing so that you can decide whether you agree with it or not, so that you can choose whether to tail it in your own exposure or to potentially even fade it if you completely disagree. That's why it's all put out there, so that you can become a better, refine your process, tail the exposure, which has been great to us to start 2026. Let's catch up on that chat and go ahead and end this thing. But let's see where we left off so that I don't skip anything. Can I recap my bets? Yeah, I got you. So we did it at the beginning of the live stream, but I'll do it again. We ended up having a great day. We had unders on Jake Knapp and Straka. We had 3 pick'em slips. 2 of them ended up hitting. So obviously not every single bet we took ended up hitting, but it was pretty close to that. We had Max Homa hit for the 3 ball. We also had this under on strokes on Griffin and Henley that ended up hitting. That was the second of the 3 that ended up hitting for us. And then also we had a couple of the 3 balls that we mixed into. And, full transparency, we didn't hit every single 3 ball that we entered either. There were 5 3 balls that we ended up entering, but we cashed on 3 of them. And considering that they were all in like that plus 150 to plus 200 range, that's going to put you well into the positive. So hopefully that's what you were looking for there, man. And yeah, it was a pretty good day for round number 2. Thanks again. Can I look at Robbie Mack's numbers? We for sure can. I knew there was at least a couple players that we hadn't deep dived yet, right? I know we're quite literally through almost all the field at this point. But let's see. Robert McIntyre in round number 2 lost ball striking and gained putting. So yeah, it's a 3 out of 10 stat profile, man. I hate to be overly critical, but he did it in the exact opposite fashion of what you're looking for. Unsustainably with the ball striking and then over his head with the putter. Just kind of reeks negative regression, but he's still a quality player. You can see him snap out of it. He said, what about a Straka or Rio at 4 birdies? I prefer somebody like a Wyndham Clark myself, just because he's a little bit more of an aggressive player. But between Straka and Rio, I think Straka could make sense at 4 because he was a top 20 birdie maker on tour last year. In fact, Straka at 4 seems like a pretty good projection. I want to see if they have him on better at that number. Again, I just refuse to play on prize picks until they fix their payouts. It's just like, why even give them the action when you have a similar site in Underdog where we can do that for? Yeah, it doesn't look like they have anything. Let me double check. He's at 4.5 on better, so you can't get him at 4. Wherever you can get him at 4, though, probably is on prize picks. Yeah, I think there's some value on that. So you might have missed it, but Robbie Mack today, yeah, I just went through the shots gained metrics on that, so hopefully that helps you out there. He said, thanks, Luke. You're the man. Let's have ourselves a day. I appreciate that, Jay. Let's get after it. You're looking at an under on pars that is minus 174 on DraftKings. Ooh, so those par bets is what I'll say is they're personally not my favorite. I have a really hard time breaking down the par board just because my brain is so trained to look at birdies are better and bogeys are worse that pars for me almost like short circuits it. But let me see if I can give you some analysis, because just because I'm not good at it doesn't mean I can't try, right? So birdies are better plus bogeys are worse. The total is about 7 per round. If you just add those 2 together. And I would say that I actually think that that average is probably going to go up, because I think the birdie average is going to stay similar. And I think if they take away lift, clean, and place, that there's a chance that the bogey or worse average goes up to like 3 or like 3.25 per round. So in that case, the par average might be closer to like 10.5 per round if that were to happen. So somebody like Noren that doesn't make a ton of birdies and is also a pretty good bogey avoider, I think would make a lot of sense on that, man. Unfortunately, I'm not going to bet on prize picks just because, again, I don't want to give them that action. But yeah, that maybe with the Straka. In fact, if you guys want to enter this, you can, because I think it's value. I think that was a really sharp take when we had there in the chat. So yeah, Noren 11.5 pars. That's kind of crazy. And then Straka at 4 birdies. So look, he's at 4.5 now. So I guess they bumped that point by 0.5. Yeah, that Noren prop. I don't think I can do it. Maybe I will. 175 value too is like crazy into the plus EV range. I just feel like such a degenerate betting par props though. It's like you have all these other categories and we're choosing pars. It's just kind of crazy. You might have missed it, but Robbie Mack, I already got you on that. Thanks, Luke. Already went through that too. My bad. I went back on the chat. That's my apologies, not yours. He said, running late, but you're here. Let's have a day. You didn't see that it was moved back to 9 Eastern. You missed the entire hour. Yeah, it was moved to 9. I put that out on my X/Twitter. So if you want to get the updates on start times, you can check the YouTube. That'll always be correct on there. Then also my X/Twitter. I post a lot of information on that. Let's see. He said, no, can I timestamp the DFS portion? No, I'm not doing that. Sorry. It's already to lock. So I'm definitely not going to do that. Sorry, dude. Am I going to go through pins? I already did so before we got on the live stream, so I'm not going to do it together. The pin locations look very similar to round 2. They're easier than round 1. Round 1 looks like maybe the hardest pin setup that we're going to get the entire week. But I wouldn't say that the round 3 pins are like that much easier than round 2. They look almost the same difficulty-wise. There are some that are easier. There are some that are harder. Like 10 is the one that is way easier. That's a front left pin location, and it's in the center. That one is the drivable par 4. Will have by far the most birdies and even eagles that you'll see the entire week. But for example, like 13, 15, I believe are really tough pin locations on what are already pretty difficult holes. So I think it's a good mix of hard versus easy pin locations. Spieth versus Homa matchup. I considered taking Spieth on that one. Spieth is only the slight favorite against Max Homa. And I don't know why when I control F it didn't show up, but there it is. The Max Homa versus Jordan Spieth. The only problem that kept me from entering this is that Max Homa has unbelievable course history here. I mean, Jordan Spieth has okay course history himself, maybe like top 20 in the field from that perspective, but Max Homa has a win, 2 other top 10 finishes at Riviera Country Club. So, and that win, by the way, came when he was nowhere near the golfer that he is today. And I know he's fallen off a little bit, but it was before he's ever really ascended on the PGA Tour was when Max Homa won that event. So I would say that, like, yeah, I would lean towards Spieth, but I didn't bet it myself. I just didn't see a big enough edge to go out there and do so. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support on the channel as per usual. If you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. Also, subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Round 4, we're going to have another live stream for tomorrow's action, and that's probably going to be tonight. Not going to do a morning live stream every single time, even though it was a lot of fun hanging with you guys here in the morning, just to make sure that we can get more eyes on the live stream. The replay crew is important to take care of as well. So we'll make sure to do that. But until then, best of luck with everything that you guys are entering. I hope to see you guys at the top end of the GPPs. Let's cash out at some of our prop exposure as well. And for all of the content that I have for today, I know it's pretty much locked for DFS, and we're getting pretty close to the prop side of things. But any live ads that we have from the prop and the betting side, you guys can find on my Patreon page, as well as all around 4 content on the Showdown side of things. But that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys a little bit later on tonight.